All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are getting into the fascinating and, frankly, a little scary science of why some foods feel completely and totally irresistible. We're talking about how they might actually be designed to rewire our brains.
You know that feeling, right? You start the day with the best intentions, but then that one specific food, the one I'm talking about, shows up. And it's like a switch just flips in your brain, and all that resolve just vanishes.
And what's our first instinct when that happens? We blame ourselves. We think, ugh, why can't I just be stronger? If I just had more discipline, I could say no. It's this really common cycle of feeling like a personal failure. But, as we're about to see, that blame might be completely misdirected.
Yeah, what if this whole time it wasn't a fair fight? What if the game is actually rigged? This is such a huge shift in thinking because it suggests the problem isn't your character, it's about chemistry. It's about what these foods are doing to your brain.
Now, to be super clear, we're not talking about all food here. We're zooming in on a very specific category: ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. And these aren't just, junk food. These are industrial creations, engineered to be hyper-palatable, which is just a fancy scientific way of saying they're so ridiculously delicious that your brain finds it almost impossible to say no.
In fact, investigative reporter Michael Moss makes this really powerful, really startling comparison. He calls ultra-processed food the new tobacco. And that's not just a headline to grab your attention. This analogy is actually rooted in some pretty shocking corporate history.
Just look at this timeline for a second. In the 1980s, the exact same companies that had perfected the science of making cigarettes addictive, we're talking Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, they went out and bought up huge food corporations like Kraft and Nabisco, and they brought all their knowledge about creating craveability and just applied it directly to the food we eat. And the result? By 1997, the World Health Organization was calling obesity a global epidemic. Coincidence?
So that's the backstory, the who and the what. But what about the how? I mean, how do these foods get such an iron grip on us? Well, it turns out they're really good at hijacking 3 specific, crucial systems in our brain. Let's break them down, one by one. First up, the reward system. This is our brain's ancient pleasure circuit. It's hardwired into us to make sure we seek out things we need to survive, like food and water. But UPFs don't just activate this system, they send it into absolute overdrive.
And to really get this, you have to understand the difference between 2 feelings: liking and wanting. Liking is pretty simple. It's the pleasure you get from the taste. But wanting, that's different. That's the intense, nagging, compelling drive to get the food in the first place. And that feeling? That's fueled by dopamine. UPFs are literally engineered to give you a massive dopamine rush, which makes the wanting way, way more powerful than the actual liking.
And this right here is where the rewiring happens. That huge surge of dopamine is like a giant flashing neon sign in your brain. It creates this powerful memory that just screams, "That was amazing. Do it again. Remember this." So your brain starts to link everything, the time of day, how you were feeling, where you were, to that reward, creating these subconscious triggers that spark intense cravings out of nowhere. Okay, let's move on to the second system they hijack, which is the stress system. We've all heard of comfort eating, right? Well, UPFs are masters at exploiting this. They offer this quick, easy, but very temporary escape from bad feelings. But here's the thing. It's a trap.
The reason it's a trap has a name. It's called the opponent process. Think about it like a seesaw in your brain, a pleasure-pain seesaw. When you eat a UPF, you get that rush of pleasure, and the pleasure side of the seesaw goes way up. But your brain craves balance, so to even things out, it immediately starts pushing down on the other side, the pain or low side.
And this is where the cycle gets so vicious. The more you do it, the stronger your brain's pain response gets, and it lasts longer. So that initial pleasure hit gets weaker and weaker, but the rebound low, that crash, it gets deeper and just feels awful. And pretty soon, you're not even eating to feel good anymore. You're eating just to escape feeling bad. That is the very definition of the addiction trap.
And that brings us to the third and final system that UPFs hijack, our control system. This is the part of our brain that's supposed to be in charge, the part that handles rational thought, long-term planning, basically our impulse control. It's our stop button. So just think of it like there's a constant battle going on in your head. You've got your impulsive go brain that's screaming, "I want it and I want it now." And then you have your rational stop brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is trying to say, "Hey, wait a second, let's think this through." Well, UPFs deliver a knockout 1-2 punch. They supercharge the go brain with that dopamine rush we talked about, and at the same time, they actually weaken the stop brain's ability to hit the brakes.
And you might think this takes years to happen, but the research is just startling. In studies on rats, a diet high in these foods can physically damage the parts of the brain responsible for memory and impulse control in as little as 4 or 5 days. It happens that fast. It's kind of terrifying.
So, what does all this brain hijacking actually look like in the real world? It looks like this. A landmark study put people in a lab and gave them unlimited access to either ultra-processed food or whole foods. The result? The group on the UPF diet automatically, without trying, without even realizing it, ate 500 extra calories every single day. It wasn't about choice. Their rewired brains were just driving them to do it.
So, let's put this all together. What is the single most important thing to take away from all this? It's that the struggle you feel, it is not a character flaw. It's not a lack of willpower. It is a completely predictable biological response to consuming a substance that was engineered to do exactly this. But, and this is the important part, while your brain has been rewired, it can be rewired back. Neuroplasticity is a two-way street.
And that leaves us with this one last, really crucial question. For years, we've been told the answer is just to try harder, to have more discipline, more grit. But maybe we've been using the wrong tools for the job this whole time. What if the real key to taking back control isn't about fighting harder, but about understanding better what you're actually up against?